Who let the cleaning lady into the boardroom? The words floated in with the champagne, sharp and glinting like cut crystal. Everett Calloway IV did not raise his voice. He never needed to. The silence that followed was louder than any insult. He could have shouted. Across the gleaming mahogany table, the laughter was tight and deliberate. 20 executives in tailored suits, most of them men, all of them white, chuckled like they had rehearsed it. The kind of laughter meant not to entertain, but to isolate. She did not blink. Evelyn Ward reached for a linen napkin with the grace of a surgeon. The coffee stain on her blouse was still fresh, spreading like ink on parchment. She dabbed at it, silently, precisely, until the laughter died of its own awkwardness. Everett smirked from the head of the table, swirling his flute. Sorry about that. Guess we forgot the service entrance was on the lower floors. From his left, a chuckle. Happens all the time. Someone else muttered. Hell of a dry cleaning bill. Evelyn folded the napkin and laid it beside her plate. Her hands calm, her face unreadable. Then her phone buzzed once. She glanced down, confirmed. $4.7 billion acquisition. Final signature pending. She turned the phone over. No one noticed. 3 hours. Earlier, the parking space said visitor. Evelyn backed her car into it anyway. Not because she had to, but because parallel parking left room for exit. Always, she stepped out into the frigid morning, adjusting her coat against the wind slicing down Lexington. The Calloway building loomed ahead, a glass and steel monolith. 68 stories tall, with a helipad on top and marble imported from Italy on the floors no one walked on. Inside the lobby, the security guards tensed the moment she approached the executive entrance. Deliveries are around back, one said, blocking her path with his clipboard. I have a meeting. She held out her badge. Evelyn Ward, Jenkins Capital. The other guard squinted. What department? Acquisition. The taller one cocked his head. And you'll want the service elevator. This one's for executive access. She smiled politely. I'm aware. I'd like to see your visitor policy in writing. He blinked, confused. 10 minutes later, a supervisor escorted her to the private elevator with forced apologies. Neither guard met her eyes as the doors closed. On the 63rd floor, Everett Calloway III was sipping his second scotch of the morning. His son adjusted his tie for the third time in as many minutes. This Jenkins firm is overpaying, Everett III muttered, staring at a framed oil painting of his father with a senator. They're throwing around diversity dollars like it's charity season. Everett IV laughed. Let them. We dump a dead division and get a round of applause for being progressive. Everybody wins. He raised his flute. 2 optics. The elevator chimed. The receptionist's voice crackled. Through the intercom, Ms. Ward has arrived. Everett's brows knitted. That was fast. When Evelyn stepped into the boardroom, the temperature dropped 5 degrees. 11 men, 1 woman, all white. All staring. Everett rose halfway, squinting past her toward the door. You must be Ms. Ward's assistant. I'm Evelyn Ward. She held out her hand. Everett took it slowly, his grip limp with disbelief. Of course, Everett III smiled without warmth. We just expected someone ... else. Evelyn said nothing, claiming the seat directly across from Everett IV. She opened a leather folio and placed it on the table. Shall we begin? The meeting began as a performance. Everett used small words, big gestures. When she asked about financial discrepancies in the Eastbridge division, he talked about forward-looking optimism. When she referenced labor violations, he quoted outdated market trends. His tone was honeyed and arrogant, the practiced condescension of a man who had never been corrected in public. When she countered with Department of Labor filings and SEC whistleblower reports, the room grew uneasy. The only other woman at the table, Patricia Reynolds, VP of Operations, watched the interaction with tight shoulders and a frozen smile. Everett tried humor next. We're not here to drown in details, he said. Let's toast to new partnerships. Instead, champagne arrived. Every glass was filled, except hers. The server hesitated. Everett waved him away with mock surprise. How rude of us, he said. Let me fix that. He stepped toward her with the bottle, pouring generously until the flute tipped. The champagne splashed down her front. Gasps, then laughter. Not the amused kind, the cruel kind. The safe kind. Evelyn did not react. She dabbed again. Slowly, accidents happen, her silence seemed to say. But patterns do not lie. Later, as lunch was served, the executives swapped stories. Golf tournaments. Ivy League mishaps. One shared a tale of mistaken identity at the country club. Another mocked a junior hire who wore Payless shoes to a shareholder gala. Diversity's a journey, Everett III said, raising his fork. But some folks just don't pack the right luggage. The table chuckled. When Evelyn's turn came, Everett IV cut in smoothly. Let's spare Ms. Ward. I'm sure she's had quite the journey. She looked up. Actually, I do have a story. Everett raised a brow. Harvard Business School. Quantitative analysis. Final. My partner never showed, so I presented alone. Scored the highest mark in the cohort. Everett smirked. Affirmative action's gift that keeps on giving. Patricia dropped her fork. Evelyn sipped her water. The real shift began with silence. She rose near the end of the meeting, asking to use the restroom. Everett gestured vaguely. Left, then right. Patricia can show you. I'll manage. She walked alone down the pristine hallway, heels echoing like a metronome. Inside the marble restroom, she checked the stalls. 1 breath. 2. Pulled out her phone. Marcus, she said quietly. Initiate Omega protocol. Start with board contacts. Then internal audit, you're sure? Her assistant asked. They've exceeded expectations. She ended the call. Back. In the boardroom, Everett and his father huddled in private conversation. She's composed, Everett III whispered. Too composed. She cracked, Everett IV muttered. They always do. He looked up as Evelyn re-entered. His smile returned. Everything all right? Evelyn sat with perfect posture. Let's continue. Her blouse still bore the stain, but she wore it now like armor. He handed her the pen like it was a test. She took it like it was a weapon. The acquisition packet sat between them, its leather binding creased from overuse. Every signature line was a trap dressed up in formality. Just the usual, Everett said lightly, fingers steepled. Non-disclosures, board oversight. You've done this dance before, I assume? Evelyn Ward held the pen still in her hand, but did not lower it. Have, she said, though rarely with such theatrics. That earned a few chuckles, nervous ones. Not from Everett. Smile slipped for a fraction of a second, then returned. Wider. Everett III spoke next, voice slow and heavy with generational weight. The Calloway name, he said, means a great deal to a great many people. Evelyn flipped the page. I'm sure it does. Elevator doors hissed shut. The tour was Everett IV's idea, a power play. He had suggested it, casually as if showing. Off his house to a guest who might one day own the garage. This company has roots, he said, tapping his ID to unlock a restricted floor. My grandfather laid the cornerstone himself. There's something to be said for legacy, don't you think? She did not answer. Below, the executive polish gave way to dull lighting and concrete. Air smelled of oil and cold steel. Fluorescent tubes buzzed overhead. Forklifts trundled through narrow aisles, stacked with brown-labeled boxes and sharp metal corners. Here's where the real work happens, he said, raising his voice over the machinery. Not in boardrooms, but here, with the people. Took note, every people in sight was black or Latino or Southeast Asian. No nameplates, no windows, no eye contact. One woman in a reflective vest glanced up, recognition flickering in her eyes. Full benefits, Everett added proudly. And Pizza Fridays. Jenkins Capital appreciates social impact, yes? Evelyn said nothing. The woman in the vest turned. Away they walked past a row of safety signs, point to days since last incident hall. Visitors must wear goggles. OSHA reviewed 18 months ago. The stairwell was narrow and unheated. Everett gestured for her to go first. She didn't. He sighed and kept walking. Listen, he said, once they were alone. I understand your position. I do. Representation matters, but this acquisition is complex. If you need someone to walk. You through the technicals, I don't. He stopped mid-step, one hand on the railing. She met his eyes. I know exactly what I am buying and what I am being sold. Back on the executive floor, the hallway lights seemed brighter. Too bright. Evelyn's pupils contracted, but she did not slow down. Her watch buzzed as she walked past the receptionist. Omega Protocol, Phase 1 initiated. Financial audit in progress. Flagged vendor shell companies. 14. Inside the boardroom, a tray of coffee had replaced the champagne. The executives were seated now, quieter. Someone had adjusted the thermostat. The air felt artificial and over-filtered. Evelyn entered without a word, sat without a glance, crossed her legs. The champagne stain on her blouse had stiffened into a bloom of amber. No one commented on it this time. Patricia Reynolds kept her eyes on her water glass. Everett cleared his throat. Let's discuss the transition phase post-acquisition. We recommend retaining the current leadership structure for stability. A few heads nodded. Evelyn tilted her head slightly. Interesting. Is there a problem? I find it remarkable that the same leadership that created the current liabilities is being framed as the solution. Everett leaned forward, elbows on the table. You know how it is. These communities can lack executive readiness. Talent gaps, pipeline problems. I'm sure you've seen it. The room held its breath. Evelyn blinked once, then turned to the CFO, page 17. Subsection 5.3. Your employee attrition is 38%, double what you reported in your investor disclosures. The CFO stammered. That figure includes contract workers. It's a technical inflated by 62%, Evelyn continued, according to Department of Labor filings. Misclassification, chronic underpayment, safety violations. She tapped her tablet. These reports have already been forwarded. To the SEC. Everett sat back. Now wait a minute. Don't worry, Evelyn said quietly. They'll wait plenty. Storm was gathering. Across the table, phones began to vibrate. 1, then 4. Then nearly all. Emails, pings, calendar cancellations. A name started circulating in subject lines. Jenkins Capital Holdings, someone whispered. Is this a hostile maneuver? Evelyn stood again. This wasn't a negotiation, she said. Was a stress test. Everett's father looked up, his face suddenly paler. You came here to provoke us? No. She picked up her leather folio. I came to see if this company was worth saving. Everett's voice cracked for the first time. You're bluffing. Her smile was small. You'd need a better hand to know that. In the hallway, Evelyn stepped away. Her fingers hovered. Over her phone, one message already glowed across the screen. Final legal green light secured. Stakeholder outreach initiated. Proceed to stage 2? She typed, yes. Accelerate. Behind her, the boardroom erupted in low voices, rising pitch, the rustling. Panic of people losing altitude too fast? The kind of tone that only comes when people realize the floor is about to drop and they have nothing to hold on to but each other. She did not leave the building. Not yet. Instead, shaking hands with governors and generals, past framed letters from presidents, honorary doctorates, oil-slick magazine covers that spoke of power and legacy and influence at the end of the hall. A window looked out over Midtown. The city sprawled in the winter light, sharp angles catching the pale sun. Patricia Reynolds stood there, arms crossed. Pretending to study the skyline, Evelyn stopped beside her. 15 years, Patricia said softly. That's how long I waited for someone like you to walk through that door. I'm not here to inspire, I know. That's why it matters. Patricia turned to her. There's more hidden IPs. Trade secrets. They've been burying them under spin-off filings. Held out a drive, small, silver, heavy. Evelyn took it and said only one word. Understood. Do you know who you're speaking to? He asked. The silence that followed was not fear. It was confirmation. The boardroom sat in a fragile quiet, no voices raised, no documents passed. only the soft shuffling of discomfort leather chairs. Creaking, fingers tightening on glass stems, jaws clenched just enough to ache. Evelyn Ward returned to her seat without invitation. Patricia Reynolds followed 3 steps behind, face unreadable, eyes fixed straight ahead. Neither woman said a word. The sound of Patricia's chair sliding back into place was louder than anything. Everett Calloway had said all afternoon. Everett watched them like a man watching a glitch in the system, confused that something unfamiliar had entered his domain, and refused to leave quietly. "We were just about to wrap," he said, forcing a laugh. "No need to revisit old wounds." Evelyn nodded once. "Let us make sure none of them get infected." 10 minutes passed. Everett droned on about legacy clients and strategic alignment. His voice was animated, his body language confident, but his fingers tapped the edge of the table, betraying a rhythm of something else. Not control, not assurance, but counting. Taps between words. He was watching the clock. Evelyn listened. Not to what he said, but what he avoided. Every time she raised a question, he steered around it. Every mention of vendor inconsistencies, HR violations, or class action whispers was drowned in phrases like industry best practices and qualified immunity. Euphemisms as shields, language as fog. Across from her, Everett III studied her without speaking. He had said less than anyone since her return. But his eyes, sharp, glassy, unreadable, never left her face. He recognized something, but it was too late. At 2:32 p.m., Evelyn's phone vibrated once. She did not check it. She already knew what it would say. Across the city, Marcus Chenner, chief of staff, sat in a glass-paneled office, surrounded by glowing screens. On one, a waterfall of financial records scrolled like code in a heist film. On another, a call log of whistleblower statements, gathered across 6 months. "Stage 3, authorized," he said into his headset. Behind him, a legal team began printing documents with the focus of surgeons preparing for open-heart surgery. No panic, no noise. Only certainty. At Jenkins Capital, failure was not an accident. It was a choice. They had chosen to wait. In the boardroom, a new voice entered the conversation. Gerald Spence, interim CFO, cleared his throat. "Ms. Ward," began, glancing sideways at Everett, "we appreciate your diligence. But some of these findings, they are incomplete, misinterpreted, out of context." Evelyn turned to him slowly. "Which part?" "The employee retention numbers," she said calmly. "You filtered your data, misrepresented it, and excluded the fulfillment and call center divisions from all reports." Gerald flushed. "That's not accurate." She tapped her screen. Page 43. Appendix B. Silence. Everett leaned back, stretching his arms with exaggerated ease. "Numbers are tricky, Ms. Ward. Even the smartest analysts make mistakes." She looked up. "I am not your analyst." Another buzz. This time Everett noticed he cocked his head, a little distracted. "Are we?" She set her phone down deliberately, screen dark. "Not distracted," she said. "Prepared." His jaw twitched. This whole thing, he gestured at her documents. At her tone, at the very idea of her existence, feels less like a business meeting and more like a sting operation. She smiled at last. Everett's face tightened. Stood abruptly, the scrape of his chair loud against the hardwood. "I think we're done here," he announced. "We've entertained this long enough. My father and I have another engagement." No one moved. Everett looked around. "I said we're finished." Evelyn remained seated. "No," she said. "You're just beginning." The door opened. 6 people entered. No knocking, no explanation. His presence. 3 men, 3 women, all in charcoal suits. All carrying portfolios. Their steps were synchronized, their faces unreadable. But it was not their appearance that stopped the room. It was who followed them. James Harrington, former Attorney General. Now, Chief Counsel of Jenkins Capital. He placed a stack of documents on the table with the care of a man lowering a gavel. Everett III finally spoke. This is absurd. You don't have jurisdiction, sir, James said politely. You mistook power for immunity, said is not a legal defense. A whisper of breath passed through the room. Evelyn rose from her chair and spoke. I want to be perfectly clear. She said, this meeting is not hostile. It is overdue. She walked slowly around the table as she spoke, every step measured, her heels a metronome against silence. For 18 months, Jenkins Capital has increased its holdings in your parent company. We now hold a 31% share. She stopped behind Everett's chair. Today was never about buying your failed division. It was about confirming a pattern. She tapped the folder in front of him. This, she said, was the bait. You took it every insult, every dismissal, every misrepresentation. She turned to the board. We've documented everything. Patricia stood next. Her voice did not tremble. I have corroborated the data, the suppressed patents, the falsified filings, the discriminatory promotion practices. She passed USB drives down the table. Everett tried to laugh. You think this matters? We've done business this way for decades. The board won't vote. Against us. The door opened again. A young woman entered, nervous, clutching a folder. She handed it to James Harrington. He read the note, nodded once, then turned to Everett. The board already has. Everett paled. They've called an emergency vote of no confidence, effective immediately. No one cheered. No one gasped. It was not a victory, not yet. It was a reckoning. A slow, grinding shift of tectonic plates beneath a legacy built on polished lies. Everett looked to his father. But the old man was already standing, already gathering his coat, already walking toward the door. Not a word exchanged, just the quiet, unbearable sound of a dynasty ending. Security escorted them out the same way they had come in, through a door no one held open for them. Everett Calloway III did not speak as the elevator descended. His son, Everett IV, stood beside him, red-faced and breathing through his teeth, as if he could exhale his legacy back into place. One security guard held 2 cardboard boxes each, marked with a last name in black. Sharpie inside were family. Photos, cufflinks, a watch with the Callaway crest, crystal paperweight shaped like the state of Texas. Symbols of permanence. Reduced to evidence of departure. The elevator chimed at the lobby. A young employee stepped inside, then immediately backed out upon recognizing them. The doors closed again. They had descended from kings to ghosts in 37 minutes upstairs. Evelyn did not move. She remained seated at the boardroom table. Flanked by her team, her blouse was still stained. No one offered to replace it. No one dared. The documents lay spread before her like a map of rot, negligence, of arrogance codified into policy. She did not gloat. She did not celebrate. She simply turned to Patricia Reynolds. I'll need a full employee audit. Names, roles, salaries, performance reviews. Want every division broken down to its smallest part. Patricia nodded, already reaching for her tablet. Also, Evelyn continued, pull internal emails from the last 18 months. Focus on flagged language, promotion, recommendations, complaints marked unfounded. Send it to Marcus for review. A beat. Then I want you to look at those names. Tell me which ones deserve to stay. Patricia paused. Even the senior team. Evelyn met her eyes. Especially them. Elsewhere in the building, word spread, the way truth always does first in whispers, then in waves. The Callaways are gone. Security took them out. She's staying. She owns the board. Her name is Evelyn Ward. In the shipping department. The woman in the reflective vest from earlier sat on a pallet of boxers and watched the door, waiting to see. If the change was real, in HR, a man scrolled through a spreadsheet, suddenly unsure which formulas he had manipulated and who might notice in the legal department. A junior associate locked her office door, retrieved a hidden flash drive, and quietly emailed it to a contact she had never expected to use, and in the cafeteria. 3 middle managers stood at the espresso machine in silence, each waiting for the others to speak first. None of them did. By 4 p.m., Evelyn had relocated to the executive suite, formerly Everett Four's domain. The walls were bare. The bookshelves empty. The mahogany desk polished to a shine, as though trying to erase its own history. She sat in the leather chair, opened her laptop, and began reviewing internal documentation line by line. Patricia stood nearby, reading over her shoulder. "These are the promotion memos from last year," Patricia said, scrolling. 92% male, 87% white, none from fulfillment or call center leadership. Evelyn nodded. "Any pattern to who gets flagged as a culture fit?" Patricia hesitated. There's too much overlap with who gets. "Listed as uncoachable or not polished. Code language." "Document it," Evelyn said. "We're burning the code book." Downstairs, Everett Four sat in the back of a black SUV, staring at his phone. No new messages. He had called his lawyer. Twice, he had called the chairman of the board. No response. He texted 3 contacts in the Financial Times, framing the situation as a hostile takeover by activist capital, and replied, "Already heard. Good luck." Gritted his teeth and turned to his father, who stared blankly out the window. "They'll ruin the name." His father said nothing. "I built this company's digital division from scratch. Still nothing. I made it profitable." Finally, Everett Three spoke. "You made it perform on paper. You forgot to lead." That evening, Evelyn walked the factory floor. She did not make a speech. She did not carry a clipboard or bring a camera. Crew, she walked quietly, deliberately past the machinery and the worn lockers and the old bulletin boards. Employees looked up, startled. Some whispered. Others pretended not to see her. A man in overalls stepped out of her way, but she stopped beside him. "Do you like working here?" she asked. He blinked. "It's a job. Do you recommend your children work here?" He paused. "No." She nodded. "Then we'll start there." At 7:23 p.m., Marcus entered her office carrying a sealed envelope. "It's from legal," he said, handing it to her. She opened it without comment. Inside, preliminary findings from internal investigations. Confirmed accounts of harassment ignored. 3 NDAs enforced with payout clauses. 4 incidents of retaliatory demotion, all signed off by the same 3 people. 2 were already gone. The third, Janice Halston, head of compliance, was scheduled to meet with Evelyn tomorrow morning. "Set the meeting for 7:30 a.m., Evelyn." Said, and record it. "Understood." Marcus turned to go, then paused. "There's one more thing." He pulled a slip of paper from his pocket. On it, a name circled in red ink. "She's been on every committee, every panel, never promoted, no complaints filed, no bonuses." Evelyn read the name. She looked up. "Schedule her for Friday. There's no warning. Just bring her in position. Executive Vice President of Culture and Integrity." Marcus blinked. "That's not a real position." "It is now." Later, alone in the office, Evelyn stood by the window. The city below shimmered in gridlocked red and white. She rested one hand on the glass. Her phone buzzed again. Final vote count. Jenkins Capital authorized to remove and restructure. Remaining executive leadership. She closed the message and exhaled once. Deep, quiet below. A cab honked. A couple argued on the sidewalk. Someone laughed too loudly outside a bar and inside the 63rd floor of the Callaway building. Evelyn Ward began drafting a new chapter, not just for the company, but for everyone still watching. She did not fire them all. She gave them something. Worse, a mirror and a choice. The conference room was smaller than the boardroom. No windows. Just for cream walls, a water cooler, and a round table surrounded by 9 chairs. It was meant for mid-level strategy meetings. Now it was repurposed. Evelyn sat at the head of the table, tablet in hand. Marcus stood beside her. Patricia was absent by design. This was not her meeting to lead. Across from them sat 7 department heads. 1 chair remained empty. Symbolic, deliberate. The silence stretched. A woman from legal cleared her throat. "We weren't informed this was disciplinary." "It isn't," Evelyn said. "Not yet." She tapped the screen. You're here because you stayed. The air changed. It was not accusation. Not exactly. More like gravity increasing. Several shifted in their seats. You saw it happen, Evelyn continued. You watched the culture curdle. You heard the comments. Some of you laughed. Some of you said nothing. She looked at each of them, one by one. You stayed. A man from product tried to smile. We didn't have the authority. You had proximity. Evelyn's voice did not rise. But her words did not soften either. You signed off on false evaluations. You deleted emails. You hosted talent mixers, where only one kind of talent ever made the shortlist. Heavyset woman from finance crossed her arms. What are you saying? That we're all guilty? Evelyn met her gaze. I'm saying silence has a cost. Marcus handed out folders, each one marked with a name, a breakdown, contributions, compromises, missed chances, timeline of when they chose comfort over conflict. One man skimmed his. Impaled. I thought the worst thing that could happen was getting fired. He said quietly. It's not, Evelyn replied. The worst thing is realizing your legacy is someone else's evidence. A long silence followed. Then Evelyn spoke again. You will have 30 days to reapply for your positions. Not your titles, not your compensation packages, your roles. And we're restructuring everything, flattening the hierarchy, elevating leadership from within. The man from product leaned forward. So we're not being dismissed? You're being given the chance, she said, to earn your place in the company you helped break. Across the building, whispers turned into strategy sessions. Entire teams began holding after-hours meetings. Junior employees dug through old workflows, hoping to salvage their reputations. Slack channels once used to trade golf stories were now filled with risk assessments and ethical pledges. The company had entered a phase more dangerous than chaos. Accountability. In HR, a young woman named Kiara watched the spreadsheet update. In real time, she had worked there for 4 years. Her name had never appeared in an email thread marked urgent. Now it did. Subject: Internal Equity Audit minus urgent sender, Evelyn Ward. She stared at it for a long time before opening it. Meanwhile, Everett Four watched from a distance, from the 34th floor of a WeWork downtown. He sat at a rental desk beside a man half his age who wore sneakers to investor meetings and believed in cryptocurrency as religion. His inbox was mostly silent. One message had arrived that morning. Notice from the Securities and Exchange Commission requesting documentation regarding corporate disclosures tied to the Eastbridge sale. He stared. At the line, then at his hands, then at nothing at all. Back in the executive suite, Evelyn reviewed her next 3 appointments. First, the warehouse shift supervisor, who had filed a complaint 3 years ago that was buried before it reached HR. Second, a former intern, who now led a community tech incubator Evelyn had quietly funded. Third, Janice Halston, the only executive still in her original position, the one who had signed off on every policy now under investigation at 7:30 a.m. sharp. Janice entered. Her posture was impeccable, her suit crisp, her expression unreadable. Ms. Ward, she said, extending a hand. I appreciate your time. Evelyn did not shake it. Sit down. Janice did. Marcus pressed record. You've been here for 17 years, Evelyn began. You survived. 3 restructurings, 4 CEOs, and a dozen internal reviews. Janice nodded once. Experience has its value. It does. Evelyn slid a document across the table. This is a timeline of every non-disclosure settlement you approved since 2019. The total payout exceeds $4.2 million. Most of it unreported to the board. Janice adjusted her collar. Standard containment measures. No wrongdoing admitted. No charges filed. No justice served, Evelyn countered. Not the people in it. I protected our stock price. And now you've lost both. Janice sat back. I assume you're offering me the chance to resign. I'm offering you the chance to speak, Evelyn said. On record, what you knew, when you knew it, who ordered it. Janice hesitated. Why would I? What you say next, Evelyn said calmly, determines whether your name is buried in footnotes or carved into a lawsuit. The interview lasted 46 minutes. Janice never raised her voice, never cried, never begged, but she gave up names, dates, patterns, enough to dismantle the rot that remained. When she left the room, she did not look back. Marcus turned off the recorder. You think she'll talk again? She already did, Evelyn replied. The rest is just paperwork. At 6:15 p.m., Evelyn returned to the boardroom. The same room where champagne had once spilled across her chest like a verdict. It was empty now, cleared of its former kings. She stood at the head of the table and looked down its long stretch of polished oak. The light through the windows had turned gold. The city glowed. Behind her, Patricia entered quietly. Legal reviewed the Janice files, she said. Be enough. Evelyn nodded. Also, Patricia added, the woman you wanted to meet, the one Marcus flagged? She's scheduled for Friday, 9 a.m. Evelyn smiled. Perfect. She reached into her jacket and pulled out the pen Everett Calloway had offered her days ago, still polished, still heavy. She held it up to the light, then placed it gently in the center of the table, not as a trophy, but as a warning. She entered with no title, no expectation, and no plan. She left with a future. The elevator paused at the executive floor with a soft chime. The woman inside hesitated. She held no briefcase, wore no heels, and her clothes simple. Pressed slacks and a clean white blouse, had no designer logo. Her name was Naya Temple. She had never stood in this hallway before. Security had asked for her name twice. The receptionist had called twice to confirm. Now, as she stood before the frosted glass doors that led into the heart of what once was Calloway Industries, she was certain there had been a mistake, until Evelyn Ward opened the door herself. Miss Temple, Evelyn said, not offering her hand. Come in, Nia entered cautiously, eyes scanning the walls. She had imagined this office differently. Leather furniture, trophy displays, framed golf outings. Instead, the space was spare. The air smelled like cedar and fresh paper. The desk held a single laptop and 3 manila folders. Do you know why you're here? Evelyn asked. No, that's good. They sat opposite each other. Evelyn studied her for a moment and spoke. Over the past 6 years, you've worked in procurement, inventory coordination, and operations. 3 departments, 5 managers. 0 promotions. Naya shifted. That's accurate. Your performance reviews are exceptional. Your attendance is perfect. You've submitted 6 internal process improvements, 4 of which were implemented quietly without credit. Nia said nothing. You also trained 3 colleagues who were later promoted above you. Still nothing. Evelyn leaned forward. Why did you stay? Nia blinked. Because I needed the job. Evelyn shook her head. Needing it is not the same as surviving it. I want to know why you kept choosing to care. Across the building, names were being removed from placards. Executives were packing their offices. Consulting transitions became severance packages. Compliance officers double-checked every email with a new level of nervous energy, and everywhere Evelyn had walked the shipping floor. The Forgotten Corridors people whispered one name with a new tone. Not fear, not awe, but curiosity. Evelyn Ward, as if saying it summoned possibility. In the executive suite, Naya answered slowly. I kept caring because someone had to. Even if no one noticed, Evelyn tapped a folder. They noticed. They just chose to erase you. Then why am I here? Evelyn leaned back. Because we're not erasing you. She slid a contract across the table. Executive Vice President of Culture and Integrity. It's not ceremonial. It's operational. You'll report directly to me. You'll oversee internal ethics, transparency enforcement, and employee equity reforms. Nia stared at the contract. Why me? Because I need someone who knows how a broken machine sounds before it collapses. Nia swallowed. Never held a leadership position? Evelyn nodded. That's why you haven't forgotten how to listen. That afternoon, Nia walked the halls she used to mop during night shifts. Now people stepped aside for her not out of deference, but confusion. Her badge had changed. Her name was on the weekly memos. The ones who had ignored her now greeted her with forced warmth, but Nia's pace remained unchanged. In a quiet corner of the third floor, she visited the old procurement bullpen. Her replacement looked up, startled. "Nia, are you?" Nia smiled. "Just visiting." She paused at her old desk, the same rickety keyboard, the same loose arm on the chair she had fixed with duct tape. She said nothing, then turned and walked away. Elsewhere, Evelyn sat with Marcus and Patricia, reviewing the final round of board decisions. 7 resignations accepted, Marcus said. For declined severance, 1 attempted to negotiate golden parachute terms. He's been referred to legal. Patricia added, "We've received a wave of anonymous employee submissions. Stories, tips, historical complaints. We've started flagging recurring patterns." Evelyn nodded. "Good. Continue." She turned to Marcus. "Any media leaks, mostly from former execs framing it as a hostile day takeover." Evelyn's gaze sharpened. "Let them. The truth is heavier. It travels slower, but it lands harder." Later that night, Evelyn stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows once again. This time not alone. Patricia stood beside her. Nia stood on her other side. 3 women, 3 eras. 3 reasons this company had not completely rotted from the inside. "I've never seen the city like this," Nia said quietly. "It doesn't look down on you anymore," Evelyn replied. "That changes everything." A long pause. Then Patricia spoke. "What happens tomorrow?" Evelyn turned away from the glass. "We published the report." The next morning, an email went out at 9 a.m. to every employee across all 17 locations. Subject line: "From transparency comes trust." Attached was a 74-page internal report detailing systemic inequity, suppression of whistleblower complaints, manipulated metrics, retaliatory promotions. Names were named, timelines documented. The cover page read, "This is who we were, is not who we will be." The email was signed Evelyn Ward, CEO, E.H. Temple, EVP of Culture and Integrity Patricia Reynolds, Chief of Operations, in-homes, offices, and break rooms. People read it. Some read it twice, some cried, others printed it, read. It allowed highlighted passages, circulated it in group chats, forwarded it to friends at other companies with a single word attached: "Look." For many, it was the first time an apology had come without spin, not performative, not reactive, real, measured, accountable. At noon, Evelyn stood in front of the assembled press in the marble lobby of the building that once bore the Callaway name. No stage, no PR consultant, no teleprompter, just her. "We inherited a company with more shadow than structure," she began. "It is our responsibility to rebuild it in the light." Reporters shouted questions. She answered only one: "Will people be fired for what's in this report?" Her response was quiet: "Some already have. But what matters is not who falls, it's who rises." Then she turned and walked away. That evening, someone added a new placard to the main conference room door. It's just a piece of laminated cardstock. Held by tape, it read, "Integrity is not a department. It is a decision." No one knew who placed it. No one removed it. He always believed the world would protect him. Now he had to walk through it without armor. Everett Callaway Force stepped out of the black car and onto the sidewalk. It's like a man trying to re-enter a party that no longer remembered his name. It was a clear morning, cold, too bright. The sunlight exposed everything, every wrinkle in his suit, every line on his face, every bead of sweat the collar could no longer hide. He adjusted his tie. It no longer fit the way it used to. The building in front of him was still tall, still mirrored, still expensive, but it no longer belonged to him. The name Callaway had been stripped from the signage. The new lettering had not yet been installed. For now it stood anonymous, Like him, he approached the executive entrance. The same one Evelyn Ward had walked through days earlier. The security guard stopped him before he could reach the glass doors. "Mr. Calloway." Everett blinked. "Yes, you're not cleared." Everett frowned. "That's a mistake. We know who you are." The guard didn't raise his voice, didn't sneer. Just stood, arms crossed, gaze steady. Everett inhaled. "Let me speak to the board. They're in session." He checked his watch. "I'm still a shareholder. You're also under internal investigation." Everett's mouth opened. Closed, behind the guard, an intern passed by inside someone Everett didn't recognize, didn't care to. The intern looked up and slowed just enough to see him, then walked on. It wasn't mockery, it was worse, indifference across town. Evelyn stood at a different kind of threshold one. It didn't come with glass doors or security clearance. The steps of City Hall were crowded with reporters. Not because of Evelyn. It's because of what she represented. The public release of the internal report had made national news. 3 major networks, 4 business publications, and 2 senators had already commented. The Calloway Reckoning, 1. Headline read, "What happens when silence ends?" said another. The woman who took the room wrote one profile piece that Evelyn never read. She stood before the press without fanfare. A gray suit, no podium, no prepared remarks. "I did not dismantle a dynasty," she began. Collapsed the moment people stopped believing in it. A murmur ran through the crowd. She continued. "What we exposed inside that building exists. Everywhere on different scales, under different names. This is not about one company. It is about the systems we build to protect power instead of earn it." Questions flew at her. "Will you face retaliation? Are you going after other firms? What's next for Jenkins Capital?" She raised a hand. "I'm not chasing headlines. I'm following impact." Then she stepped away from the microphone. She had said enough. Inside the building, formerly known as Calloway, change took form not as slogans but systems. Naya Temple, now ran by weekly listening reviews where employees met without executives to air concerns, suggest policies, or simply ask questions they'd never been allowed to voice. Patricia Reynolds oversaw a total restructuring of the hiring pipeline, eliminating referral-based advancement, centralizing performance data, and instituting blind promotion scoring. Evelyn approved a transparency dashboard, every policy, every dollar spent, every demographic trend, public, real-time, company-wide. The financial markets reacted predictably. Stock dipped, analysts hedged, blogs speculated. Several longtime partners pulled advertising, others threatened lawsuits. 1. Former board member accused Jenkins Capital of weaponizing diversity. Evelyn did not respond. Instead, she met with suppliers, then regulators, then with 3 major federal contractors, one of whom, after reading the report, offered to adopt Evelyn's internal audit framework across their operations. The public might have been slow to trust, but behind closed doors, institutions were shifting, not out of guilt, but out of self-preservation. No one wanted to be next. 1 week later, Everett Calloway IV sat in a rented office suite with a lawyer from the same firm that once represented him. His chair squeaked.
The walls were beige.
The air conditioning didn't work. He held the subpoena in his hands, like it might disappear if he folded it enough times. "You're lucky it's civil," the lawyer said. "Right now." Everett didn't answer. His father hadn't returned. His calls in days. His friends were evaluating the optics. His country club placed his membership under review. His bank closed a credit line due to reputational risk. Everything was collapsing the way empires do slowly. Then all at once, in Evelyn's new office, Nia entered holding a letter. From Senator Langley's office, she said. Invitation to testify before the Senate Subcommittee on Corporate Accountability. Evelyn took the envelope but didn't open it. "Do I have to?" "No," Nia replied. "But they're listening now." Evelyn exhaled. Quiet. Controlled. "Schedule it." Nia hesitated. "Before you decide, there's something else." She held up a folded piece of paper, a handwritten letter. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. From Everett Calloway. She took it. "Read the return address." paused. "Burn it," she said. "Schedule the testimony." On the morning of the Senate hearing, Evelyn wore the same suit she'd worn in the boardroom. Not as a statement, as a memory. She entered the chamber without camera crews. Her folder was thin. She needed no notes. Across the room sat Everett. He looked thinner, smaller, not humbled. But hollowed out, he avoided her gaze. Senator Langley cleared his throat. "This committee is here to understand the mechanisms by which unethical corporate practices perpetuate harm, avoid scrutiny, and undermine public trust." He turned to Evelyn. "Ms. Ward, you may begin." She stood. "My name is Evelyn Ward," she said. "I am not here to punish the past. I am here to prevent it." Back at headquarters, a new sign was being installed above the front doors. The old name had been sanded away. The marble polished clean. The new name read simply, Ward and Temple underneath. In smaller letters, "Integrity is not optional. Power does not change people, reveals who they were all along." The day began like any other. Mid-October, clear skies. A quiet hush over the financial district, as if the city itself was holding its breath. But inside Ward and Temple headquarters, something was different. No flashbulbs. It's no dramatic resignations. It's no hidden microphones. Today was not a reckoning. Today was a beginning in the main atrium. Its employees gathered under skylights and cascading banners that read, "1 year later, what? We build together." There was no stage, no podium, just an open floor plan, and people Hootwell months ago would not have looked one another in the eye. Nia Temple stood near the back of the room, her ID badge clipped to a blazer that cost more than her first month's salary used to be, but her shoes? Still the same pair she wore on graveyard inventory shifts? Patricia Reynolds stood beside her, a tablet tucked under one arm. Her hair now streaked with gray, she no longer tried to hide. Around her, department heads now mirrored the company they served, diverse, curious, unafraid to admit what they did not know. At the front, Evelyn Ward stepped forward. She did not clear her throat. She did not need silence. She already had it. 1 year ago, she began, I walked into a boardroom where no one remembered my name. Today, I stand in a company where everyone is learning each other's stories. A soft murmur of acknowledgement moved through the room. I'm not going to give a speech. I've had enough of those. Instead, I want to tell you what we've done together. She raised her hand. A screen behind her came to life, displaying 4 simple metrics. 74% employee satisfaction increased, 58% reduction in attrition across operations, 22% rise in internal promotions. Across underserved groups, $120 million in new partnerships grounded in equity compliance, no slogans. No branding, just numbers, earned. We didn't get here because we believed in buzzwords, she said. We got here because we held a mirror to ourselves and refused to look away. Up, across the room, someone clapped. Then another. It built slowly. Not the kind of applause that follows performance, but the kind that comes after shared survival. A systems analyst from Queens, warehouse team lead from Newark, a single mother from accounts payable who had once cried in the restroom after being passed over twice. They clapped, not because they were told to, because they had finally been seen. Later that afternoon, Evelyn sat in her office. Her desk was still bare. A photo of her father, a custodian who once changed out of his suit in a staff bathroom to clean boardroom floors, sat on a shelf behind her. Marcus entered with a wrapped box under one arm and a grin he tried to suppress. Today's mail drop, Evelyn. Raised an eyebrow, Marcus placed the package on her desk. It came with a card. She opened it. Inside was a short note written in precise, familiar handwriting. You were right. Power does not corrupt. It clarifies. I thought it would destroy me, but what I built was already rotten. Use the pen better than I did, Everett Calloway. Inside the box, the pen gleamed, the one he had tried to use to humiliate her. She picked it up. It felt lighter now. She placed it in the drawer and closed it gently. That evening, Evelyn walked the floor. No cameras followed her. No guards flanked her. She stopped by the cafe, ordered a tea, sat at a small round table. Within minutes, a few employees trickled over hesitant. At first, then more. A circle formed. No hierarchy. Just conversation. How's the transparency dashboard working? She asked a compliance analyst. Better since we linked it to compensation metrics, he said. People started caring when it affected bonuses. A woman from tech chuckled. Isn't that the point of equity? It's only real when it pays. Another nodded. And when it costs something too. Evelyn smiled. They were getting it. Meanwhile, in a small community college in Brooklyn, a business ethics professor handed out a new case study. It wasn't about Silicon Valley unicorns or Wall Street crashes. It was about Ward and Temple, about how a failed acquisition revealed a systemic rot, how patience became a weapon, how dignity, when paired with evidence, became the lever that moved an empire. Students flipped through pages of timelines, charts, quotes. At the end of the document was a quote from Evelyn's Senate hearing. Redemption is not about apologies. It's about design. You fix the system so no one has to survive it the way you did. 1 month later, Evelyn stood at the edge of a construction site. The old Callaway satellite building, once used for quiet terminations and confidential settlements, was being gutted. Bulldozers hummed in the background. Beside her, Nia Temple held a clipboard and wore a hard hat 2 sizes too big. This will be the Leadership Institute, Nia asked. Evelyn nodded. No corner offices, no reserved parking. Every trainee rotates through operations before they touch strategy. Nia smiled, a new kind of executive, necessary kind. Patricia joined them, wind catching the lapels of her coat. We're naming it after your father, she said. Evelyn's breath caught. Then she nodded once. Make sure his name's spelled right. On a quiet Sunday morning, Evelyn returned. To the boardroom, it was empty, clean, unadorned. She walked the length of the table with slow, even steps. The same table where she had once been insulted, doubted, dismissed. She sat in the same chair, folded her hands, then closed her eyes. Not to forget, but to remember. The silence was no longer hostile. It was earned.